Hi, my name is TG Trouper, and with me today is Alan Beresford. I have several questions, as usual. So, Alan, tell me about yourself.
My name's Alan Beresford, and I live in Great Dunmow in Essex with my wife Sarah and our completely antisocial cat, Molly. I've had 2 books published under the nom de plume of Jacob Van Helsing, and I think probably for most people the use of the name Van Helsing is a bit of a clue that the books are going to have a vampire theme.
Right, okay. Have you got them with you?
Yes, the first one was the Van Helsing Heritage. That was published in 2023, and the second was That Van Helsing Girl, published last year, 2025.
Excellent.
And again, that's probably a bit of a hint that I'm quite new to the whole writing and publishing game.
Great. Right, so what did you do in your life before taking up novel writing, and did it provide any experience in writing?
I'm actually a biological scientist, and I spent over 30 years in medical research, most of that in cardiovascular medicine, working with major pharmaceutical companies, the likes of Pfizer when they were in the UK, and GlaxoSmithKline, and latterly acting for small biotech companies, trying to help them that are in that field. I guess the high spot, or definitely the high spot of that career, was in the mid-80s when I was working for Pfizer, and I had the good fortune, or skill, I like to think, to discover a novel drug for the treatment of high blood pressure.
Oh, wow.
Called amlodipine.
Oh, yeah, I take it.
Right.
Thank you very much. I take that.
Yes, well, it despite it being 40 years ago, it's still on the WHO, the World Health Authority list of essential medicines. And as you obviously found, if you happen to turn up at your GP with high blood pressure, it's probably one of the first, if not the first, drugs they'll try you on. And obviously, I'm very proud of that, because although I haven't granted anybody eternal life, I guess over the years, that compound has given people a longer, healthier life.
Yeah. Oh, that's remarkable.
Yes. So, in terms of, well, that's the previous life. So, if anyone's interested in that, if they put my real name in, AP Beresford, followed by metabolism, then they'll get that on an AI search or a Google search.
It's remarkable.
But in terms of did it help in writing, then it's a yes and no, in that from a subject matter, then it was helpful. But probably over the years, I've had maybe 30, 35 papers published in scientific journals and chapters of scientific textbooks. But obviously that's strictly non-fiction. It's got to be accurate and precise and concise. So no, it hasn't really helped from that point of view.
I suppose a vampire's victim, it would be useful if they had high blood pressure, because they wouldn't have to suck so hard.
Yeah.
Thinking logically. What actually prompted you... I'll start that again. What actually prompted you to adopt the persona of Jacob Van Helsing?
Well, I've always been a fan of Gothic novels, especially Victorian Gothic horror, from, I think, growing up with reading things like H.G. Wells's The Island of Dr. Moreau, Stevenson's Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and of course Stoker's Dracula. And then a fan of the early films in the genre, back to the original Nosferatu by F.W. Murnau in the 1920s, then through to the 1930s Dracula with Bela Lugosi, and then of course into the 70s with Universal Films and Hammer Horror with the likes of Peter Cushing and so I've always been interested in that. But obviously with my background, the idea that somebody or something could walk about with a non-functioning heart and no circulation is a bit of a problem, along with the rest of the biology that goes with it, so turning into bats or dogs or wolves. Because it sticks in my head that the biggest bat ever described is a Pan-A giant fruit bat, which had a wingspan of about 6 feet, but it weighed less than 2 kilograms. So on a good day, I weigh about 80 kilograms. So I'd need a wingspan 40 times that, so 240, 250 feet. So I'm not going to be drifting into somebody's bedroom to ravage them with that. But that said, I'm actually a member of the London-based Dracula Society, who are a literary group. They don't lurk about the back streets of London in an opera cloak and false teeth. A lot of the members are authors either of novels or plays, or they work in the theatre and direct plays and films and so on. And the group has a Latin motto, if I can remember it, which is Credo quam... forgotten the last bit of it. But it translated, it means believe it because it's impossible.
Yeah.
And I think I can do that. Reading the books and the films, suspend belief, and enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah. It is fiction after all.
It may not be frightening, but quite often it's unsettling. But then reality sets in and think, well, you can't do all that. So my aim really in the novels is to try and create vampires that are more scientifically believable and viable.
It does make sense.
And to try and hang on to some of the key features of vampires. So they obviously they like to taste the blood, especially from virgins. They're very fast. They're very strong. They're potentially immortal. They can withstand serious injury and recover really quickly, but not having their heads cut off. And they don't disintegrate in the sunlight, but although they don't spend their summers on the Mediterranean beach, they do try and stay in the shadows. So I hope I've done that in books.
Even Bram Stoker's Dracula could walk about in daylight.
Yes. Yeah, there's never any mention of it disintegrating.
That was a Hammer invention, wasn't it? Yeah. So, is the science behind your scientifically credible vampires explained in your novels?
Again, it's a yes and no. It's hinted at or described to some extent in the novels, but the actual science behind the ideas is just at the back. I haven't done as I would in a scientific paper. I haven't got a list of references that you can chase up and find out if it would really work. But obviously now you can do an AI search on the concepts in there. The problem with trying to put it in the stories is that the first book, The Van Helsing Heritage, is set at the turn of the 18th to 19th century, so up to the First World War. The second book chronologically follows on from that into the middle of the 20th century, so around the Second World War. So it's very difficult. The science is very much 21st century, so it's difficult to have your characters credibly discussing 21st century science back in the early 20th.
It sounds like there's been a long conflict between your love of science and love of vampires. So was there a specific event which pushed you to take up the pen as Jacob Van Helsing?
Well, strangely, it's probably an age thing, but being a latecomer to social media, and I was quite surprised when I did go onto those things to find out how much personal information they seem to want up front. Your name, your age, were you in a relationship, what was your education, and wanting a bio. And I thought, well, I don't really want to put all that personal information in there to start off with. And so I was probably rereading Dracula for the umpteenth time, and thought, well, I'll make a character up that can be the son of the Van Helsing in the novel, and then who were my parents, what was my background in science and so on. And I sort of got carried away with it, and that's what started me off writing it, thinking, well, I know the science. I don't like, some of the extremes in the books. So that's what started me off.
Okay. So, having started on novel writing, how long did it take you to write the two you have so far?
It's quite a difference. The first one probably took me 5 or 6 years to actually get to completion. The second one, that Van Helsing girl, only took me about 2 years. The reason for the discrepancy was, at least with the second one, as a hobby as well as starting to write, I used to make what I called Gothic curiosities, so using fiberglass and resins, making full-size vampire heads and Frankenstein monster heads and skulls and various different monsters, and also some animated figures like the old-fashioned seaside fortune-telling machines. And the house and the shed and the garage were all getting full of these things. So I rented a little shop come gallery in Great Dunmow, very much not on the high street, it was a back street. And I only opened 3 days a week. It was very quiet until the school kids came out and either came to play on the machines or probably dared each other to come in the shop. But it was deliberately quite dark, and it was quiet, and I was surrounded by things from my head, Gothic ideas. So it was an ideal setting, I found, really. And because it was quiet, it really flowed for the second one. I've made a start on a third one, and the shop closed down. The lease ran out after 3 years. I sold quite a lot of stuff, but some of it made its way back to the garage. And I've tried creating the same atmosphere at home in a study, and it's not really working. But certainly, I think the atmosphere was what made the difference in getting the second one out much quicker.
Okay. So you'd recommend creating a specific atmosphere to put you in the mood for writing? Are the things from your experience to date that you'd recommend or try to avoid?
Yes, it's probably, you'd say, trying to be too clever. As I said, I used to work with biotech companies, and to be helpful, you've got to be on top of the subject and whatever disease area they're working in, and ideally ahead of what's published to help them see a way forward as a consultant. And so whereas originally it was all having to subscribe to scientific journals and read the papers, obviously through the years that's become much easier with Google searches and so on. And now, I guess, it'd be even easier with AI to very quickly get on top of things. But it does mean that certainly the last third of my career was actually almost totally doing searches for things. So that's obviously translated to the book. So if I want a vampire to look authentically as though he was in Hungary at the start of the 15th century, then I'll research what was going on in Hungary at the time, where was important, what was important, and then dig down to find individuals who potentially could be vampires, guys who've survived the most horrendous injuries, had really long lifespans. There's no real background to where he came from, and his death is it. And there are quite a few scattered about. And then if I want to move him to 17th century Prague or whatever, do the same thing there. So you can spend a huge amount of time doing that, and it's fascinating. And I look at things that I would never dream of looking at. But it does mean that you tend to find characters that you don't want to let go of, and they don't really fit in the plot. And it's very difficult to let go of them. You're thinking, well, I want people to see how clever I am, how authentic. It's a bit like my referring to amlodipine earlier. You know, I've done it. You're going to read about it, and so I've tried to avoid that too much in the second book, not introducing characters because it's going to confuse the reader. They're not going to know who the important people are. Do I need to remember this? Do I need to write them down because there's so many names? So, I certainly try and avoid doing that. And you're going to have somebody to read through it and say, you know, who's this? Who's that? Where do I need to remember this?
Do you have a proofreader?
Only my wife and an old school friend of mine who actually did his degree in history, so he's very helpful. If I've made a mess of things don't add up, you can't have done that in that century because so and so didn't have them. So they've been my main go-to.
So, will there be a third book?
Yes, I mentioned one that's going quite slowly. Obviously, it'll be another vampire-themed book. I've always had a bit of a fixation with the idea of vampire nuns, for whatever reason, lurking about down the centuries. And also the plan is to end it with a couple of 1960s conspiracy theories that are well known. So the title, if it's not too much of a spoiler, preliminary, is Of Vampires, Nuns and the Grassy Knoll.
Okay.
And the term the grassy knoll probably means quite a lot to, dare I say, our generation. But again, anyone who doesn't only has to look online these days. So, yes, it's not going to be done in 2 years, I don't think, like the last one. It'll be a bit longer. So I hope people can wait.
Okay, so finally, where can people buy your books?
On Amazon, they were published by, and I've forgotten the name. But yeah, you can get them as ebooks or the paperbacks on Amazon.
Okay. There will be links in the description down below. So, Alan, thank you very much.
No, thank you very much.
Thank you.